All right, let's dive into something that's, a little weird and maybe a bit unsettling about how our minds work. The bystander effect. We're going to explore the psychology behind why a whole group of people can see an emergency happening and just do nothing. So let's get right into it. To get us started, I want you to picture a scene that might feel, well, a little too familiar. So imagine this. You're walking through a busy hallway. Maybe you're at work, maybe at school. You're feeling good. And then, bam, it happens. You trip on absolutely nothing, your own feet, and you go down. I mean, it's a full-on spectacular wipeout. And for that one horrible moment, everything just freezes. You look up, and there are dozens of eyes on you, but no one's moving. They're just looking. It's like you've suddenly become a piece of public art. Well, that bizarre collective paralysis, it actually has a name. This right here is the bystander effect, and it's so strange because it's a total paradox. The more people there are who could help, the less likely it is that any single person actually will. And it's not because they're bad people, it's all about the powerful, invisible influence of the crowd. So to really understand where this whole theory even came from, we have to go back to a pretty horrifying event. One that shook a whole city and ended up kicking off decades of research. So back in 1964, a woman named Kitty Genovese was tragically murdered right outside her apartment building. But the story that the media ran with was just explosive. It claimed dozens of her neighbors heard her screams, saw the attack, and did nothing. This story led two psychologists, Bibb Latané and John Darley, to ask a really important question. Why? And this quote from that New York Times article is what really burned this story into the public's mind. I mean, it painted this picture of a cold, heartless city where people just stand by and watch something terrible happen. But was that really the full picture? Well, not really. It turns out the original story was pretty sensationalized. That whole 38 witnesses thing wasn't accurate at all. A lot of people heard something but couldn't see what was happening. And some people actually did try to get help. But even though the myth wasn't exactly the truth, the impact of that story was massive. It's what gave Latané and Darley the push they needed to figure out the real psychology going on here. So, what Latané and Darley came up with was this. Our inaction isn't really a flaw in our character, it's actually a result of the situation itself, which creates these really powerful psychological roadblocks. And they boiled it down to three main reasons. Three big mental hurdles that we all have to jump over before we step in to help someone. These three ideas are basically the foundation of the bystander effect. So let's break them down, starting with the biggest one, diffusion of responsibility. Okay, so imagine you're the only person around, and you see someone suddenly collapse. Who's responsible for helping? You are, right? 100% of that pressure to do something lands right on your shoulders. It's intense. But now, same situation, but you're in a crowd of 100 people. All of a sudden, that feeling of personal responsibility just evaporates. Without even thinking about it, your brain divides that duty among everyone else there. You think, oh, someone else will definitely call 911, or there's probably a doctor here. Your personal share of the responsibility plummets to just 1%, which makes it way, way easier to do nothing. And the other hurdles just pile on top. Pluralistic ignorance is that classic, awkward social moment. You look around to see how other people are reacting. But guess what? They're all looking at you for the exact same reason. Since nobody's freaking out, everyone just kind of collectively decides, well, I guess this isn't a big deal. And then there's evaluation apprehension, which is really just the fear of looking like an idiot. Nobody wants to be that person who overreacts and makes a huge scene about something that turns out to be nothing. Okay, so these were some pretty great theories. But Latané and Darley needed to prove them, so they brought their ideas into the lab, and they designed some really fascinating and now pretty famous experiments. In one of their most famous studies, they had people fill out a questionnaire while smoke started to pour into the room. Now, when a person was in there alone, 75% of them got up and reported the smoke. And this is wild, when they were in a room with two other people who were secretly actors told to just ignore it, only 10% did anything. That's a huge difference, all because of the passive presence of two other people. They showed the same exact effect with an emergency you could only hear. People listened over an intercom while another student in another room seemed to have a seizure. If the person thought they were the only one listening in, 85% of them rushed to get help. But if they thought 4 other people were also on the line, that number just craters to 31%. The more bystanders, the less help. It was clear as day. So the huge takeaway here, and this is a big one in psychology, is the incredible power of the situation itself. Psychologists call these situational variables. Things like how many people are around, or even just whether you're in a hurry, can actually be a better predictor of your behavior than your own personality or your moral code. But does this effect always play out in the messy, real world, outside of a lab? Well, another famous study took this question right into the New York City subway, and the results were really surprising. So this study from a researcher named Pillivan was set up differently. It wasn't in some sterile lab, it was on a real, moving subway car. And the emergency wasn't vague, like some smoke or a voice on an intercom. It was a person literally collapsing right there in front of everyone. And what happened was totally different. In the scenarios where the victim just appeared to be sick, like he was holding a cane when he fell, he got help an incredible 95% of the time. The bystander effect just disappeared. So what gives? Why the huge difference? Well, it probably comes down to two big things. First, the emergency was crystal clear. There was no ambiguity. A person falling over is obviously a problem, so you don't need to look around for clues. And second, everyone was trapped together in a subway car. You couldn't just walk away, which might have made everyone feel a stronger sense of shared responsibility. Just understanding that these psychological forces are at play is really the first step to beating them. When we make a conscious choice to fight that diffusion of responsibility, to be the one who defines the situation for everyone else, we stop being a bystander. We become what some people call an upstander. And that really leaves us with a final thought. Just by being aware of these invisible forces, we're already in a much better position to break their spell. So the next time you're in a crowd and something happens, remember what you've learned today. The choice to act, it just might start with you.